Is it recording? Okay. So I choked to death. All right, so cosine theta is x over r. That has to be less than 0. That means x has to be less than 0 because r always equals 1. R is your radius. It's a distance. It equals 1. Tangent also, it's equal to y over x. It also has to be less than 0. So if that's the case, if these two things have to happen, if x is already less than 0, then what do we know about y? Right, y has to be greater than 0 since x is already being less than. X has taken up this negative spot. It's called dibs.
So it has to be in the second quadrant.
Yep. Since x is less than 0 and y is greater than 0, then theta terminates in quadrant 2.
I'm getting it. I'm like, it's clicking.
It's clicking, you're getting there?
The cogs are turning.
Okay.
We're gonna have to memorize what cosine and tangent, all those are. Like x over.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily x over because r is always 1. Cosine is your x value. Sine is your y value. Now, as far as tangent goes, tangent is y over x or sine over cosine. See, so it's all going to start coming together. Hopefully it's going to start coming together. All right, try this one. It's kind of like this. It's a little bit different because you've got cotangent and cosine. But just use this one as your explanation for that one.
So what do we say if it's not in a quadrant?
You say where it is. Is it on an axis or does it not exist?
It's on an axis.
Okay, then say it. Which axis is it on?
Could we also like indicate whether it's like the positive or negative side of the axis? Or can we?
So it just terminates on the x-axis.
Let's talk about it.
So really, after that first one, you don't even, you're done.
Yeah, the cosine has to be less than 0. Cotangent is undefined. You can say, let's see, that's going to be negative x-axis. You can say it's going to be on the negative x-axis. But if cotangent has to be undefined, then it's on the x-axis.
Yeah.
And if you're just looking at cosine, Yeah, go ahead and say it. So cotangent is undefined. If cotangent, what is cotangent? And if it's undefined, then y equals 0, okay? If cosine of theta is less than, no, if cosine of theta equals, what does cosine equal? X over r. Then, gosh. And x has to be less than 0. All right. So since y equals 0 and x is less than 0, then the angle has to terminate where?
On the negative x-axis.
All right.
Oh, so you don't even need to memorize it. You can just think of it, the triangle thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes, okay, yeah, I got it now.
Lots of triangles. It's all triangles. All right, let's look at alpha here. The terminal side of an angle alpha passes through the points given below. Find the exact value of each of the 6 trig ratios of alpha. All right, so it passes through 5, 3. What's 5? And negative 3, I said 3, but it's negative 3, is y. So basically we have this angle that goes out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and down 3, and this angle passes through here. And it makes a right triangle where this is 5 and this is negative 3. What else do I need to know here? I need to know the hypotenuse, right? So I'll be looking at 5 squared plus negative 3 squared equals r squared. 25 plus 9 equals r squared. 34 equals r squared. Now, r squared, r equals plus or minus the square root of 34. But because this is an actual length, that is the length of your radius, if you were to draw this circle, we only use the positive one. R is the square root of 34. So now we have to find the exact value of each of the six trig ratios. Let's start with sine. Sine equals y over r. So that's a negative 3 over the square root of 34.
Do you want us to?
Yeah, I just really don't like leaving it. If it's the actual calculus exam, leave it. Other than that, don't. All right, cosine is what over what?
Y over 1?
No,
Oh, wait.
not this time. Cosine
Oh, it's x over
x over r. This one's not a unit circle. This is not 1.
Oh, yeah.
This says the square root of 34. So we're looking at 5 square root of 34 over 34. What's tangent?
Y over x.
Y over x, so that's going to be a negative 3/5. That's easy. about cosecant of alpha?
Is that just 34 over negative 3 times square root of 34?
Square root of 34 over negative 3.
Well, negative square root of 34 over 3.
Yeah, you can put the negative wherever you want. As long as there's only one of them.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
How about secant of alpha? Mm-hmm. About cotangent of alpha?
Negative 5.
Try to do this one. This one by yourself. Did you get that? All right, suppose that sine of alpha is negative 3/5 and the tangent of alpha is less than 0. Use this information to answer the following questions. In what quadrant does the angle alpha terminate? Explain your reasoning. Sine is negative and tangent's negative.
Quadrant 3.
Why would it be quadrant 3? Remember, tangent is sine over cosine. So if sine's negative and tangent's negative, cosine can't be negative. Because if it's sine over cosine, negative over negative would end up making that one a positive, which would put it in quadrant 3. But tangent's not negative. So if sine is y over r, and it is less than 0, then that means y is less than 0. So it's going to be in 3 or 4. tangent is y over x and it's less than 0, then x has to be greater than 0 since y is less than 0. If that's the case, it has to terminate in what quadrant? Where is y negative but x positive? Q4, right. So we have to draw a reference angle. It's going to be here, and I know that y is less than 0, so it's going to go down 3. And it goes out 5. I don't know what 5 is. I'm going to make it right there. So that's negative 3. That's 5. What is x? It's 4. How do you know it's 4 and not negative 4? Right, it said, we just said right here, x has to be greater than 0. So we're using the positive 4. Alright, so what's the, it says find the exact value of the other 5 functions. So what's the cosine of alpha? What's the tangent? Negative 3/4. How about the cosecant? The secant? And the cotangent? Right. Alright, suppose secant of theta is negative 3/2 and tangent is greater than 0. Use this information to answer the following questions. In which quadrant does the angle theta terminate? Explain your reasoning. Any ideas? What? What is secant? What over what? R over x. It says R over x is negative. It's less than 0. It's not 2. Then that means x has to be less than 0. So it's going to be 2 or 3. Tangent is equal to y over x. And it's less than 0, right? No, sorry, it's greater than 0. This one's negative. This one has to be positive. If that's the case, then y also has to be negative. Because the only way I'm getting a positive out of this right now if it's a negative divided by a negative. Okay? Well, this is because x is less than 0.
So it terminates in 3.
Oh. I got my like quadrants mixed up. I knew they both had to be negative, but I don't know why I said 2.
All right, so let's see if we can draw our reference angle here. Our reference triangle. So it's going to go 2 this way because x is -2. We determined that in the last question. And it goes like out 3. I have no idea how far that is. So I'm just going to say it's right there. So that's 3 and that's -2. What is this? No, that's not -2. This is -2. What is this height? What's my y value? Is it the positive or the negative square root of 5?
Negative.
It's the negative square root of 5 because we just said up here that y has to be less than 0. So we're using the negative square root of 5. What's the sine of theta?
Negative square root of 5 over 3.
It's the cosine of theta.
Negative 2/3.
They gave us the... Okay, what's the tangent of theta?
Square root of 5 over 2.
That negative and my square root sign have kind of meshed together. But that's a negative.
Oh.
And then this is going to be a negative, which is going to make it what?
Oh, well.
I'm going to try to make it more clear. It's going to be a positive. Let's see, what's next? Sine, cosine, tangent. They gave us secant, so cosecant would be what?
53 over negative square root of 5. So you have to rationalize. Should be negative 3 times the square root of 5 over 5.
Yep. And then last would be cotangent.
Then rationalize it. 2 times the square root of 5 over 5.
Perfect.
This is a lot of like visualization.
I want to skip to the next one, actually. This is just more of the same. I want to skip to the top of page 577. The terminal side of angle beta lies in quadrant 2 along the line 2x plus 5y equals 0. Order the values sine of beta, tangent of beta, cosecant beta from least to greatest. Okay, well, first of all, we have to find out some information here. So here's what we know. We know that 5x, just kidding, 2x. Yeah, let me finish writing this. 2x plus 5y equals 0. So 5y equals a negative 2x. Y equals negative 2/5 x. What's my y-intercept here? 0. What's my slope? Negative 2/5. Now, usually we do rise over run. Okay, this is a negative 2/5. And I know that it lies in quadrant 2. If I do rise over run, it's going to put me down here in quadrant 4. Because you need to go down 2 and run 5 to the right. So I'm actually going to go backwards. Okay? I'm going to just count the slope backwards. Because I've got to be in quadrant 2. So instead, I'm going to go up 2 and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. the opposite direction, and that puts me right there. Here's my triangle, and this is 2, and that's -5. If they had said, hey, it's in quadrant 4, okay, great, then I would have just gone down 2 and over 5. But they didn't. They said, hey, it's right here. What's R?
Square root of 29.
Square root of 29. Alright, so before we can put them in order, we need to find them. What's the sign of beta?
Over the square root of 29.
Yeah, and since the ultimate goal is to order them from least to greatest, we don't have to rationalize anything because we're just going to have to figure out which one's bigger anyway. Alright, what's the tangent of beta?
-2/5.
-2/5. And then what's the last one? Cosecant.
Square root of 29 over 2.
Alright, so what is the square root of 29? I know tangent's going to go first. That's definitely the smallest, not equals, comma. So that's 5, so it's 2/5 versus, okay, so square root of 29 is somewhere between 5 and 6. So 2 over 5.5 is not as big as 5.5 over 2. So sine is next, followed by cosecant. So there they are, least to greatest. Alright, pretty easy. Yeah, not too bad. Alright, your homework is just a lot more of the same. Okay, it's just a lot more of the same. Drawing a reference angle, finding the 6 values, finding the other 5 values, that sort of thing. Okay, got some free response practice. I don't know if it goes with, see if I can find my table of contents. Don't know where my table of contents is to know if it goes with tonight's homework or if it's tomorrow's classwork. Does anybody have a table of contents handy?
Yeah. Wait, what page is it?
This is day 67's homework.
So wait, what do you want him to know?
Let me just look at it real quick.
Yeah, we're supposed to do that.
It is homework? Day 67? Yes. So you're doing day 67 homework and then free response 34 and 35. So day 67, free response 34 and 35.